Hello everyone, this is Johnny, and in today's video I want to show you just how long it takes to grow Japanese maple trees from seed all the way to a mature tree that you can actually put out in your landscape and kind of estimate what it takes to get a full-size tree. It does take patience to grow from seed, but it is a very rewarding process, and it's something that I absolutely love. So first of all, here on my far left, here are some seedlings that were sprouted this year. So these came up this spring, and you can kind of see the growth there. I don't know, 2 inches or so of growth. And most of those have 2 leaves. Some of them do have 4 leaves. And so you can see the growth there. Then after about 1 year of full growth, you can see that the trees will reach somewhere around this height. This is somewhere, I'm estimating, some of these are around 4 inches tall. Some of those are maybe 5 inches. I've even seen some get to 6 inches in the first year growth here. So you can see the size there. Then on this side here, these are roughly 2 years old. And last year I put these in the 1-gallon pots. And I'll talk about potting them up later on. But in general, I've been very aggressive in potting up. But as I'll mention, if space is a constraint, I may be over potting these up as far as putting them in too large of a container too early. But I'll talk about that shortly. And then over here I have roughly 3-year-old trees, and you can see there that one is over 1 foot tall. Nice beautiful tree. It's got kind of a bronzy leaf, and it's got some green coming out. This will eventually turn pretty green later on in the season, but you'll still see some of that bronze around the middle of the leaf there. But you can see roughly what a 3-year tree looks like. And then here, and I'll have to move this over a little bit. Slide these over. Allow you to see that a little better. This tree here is somewhere around 4 to 5 years old. And you can see that it's really taking off. And this is one that I'm actually keeping in my collection. I'm not selling this one, and I really love the leaf shape and the variability of color. You can see this new growth comes in pretty red. Then you have some greens, some lighter greens, and then you have some kind of that bronzy and variations in between. And it's got a great leaf shape as well. But I really love this particular tree. But you can see roughly 4 to 5 years of growth, and this is over 2 feet tall. And it's probably old enough now that if you wanted to put this, for instance, out in a landscape, it would be sufficient. You'd probably want to keep it staked like I have here. Just to protect it a little bit, but we're starting to get to an age after 4 to 5 years that I think would be a good time to put that out in the landscape. And then when it comes to growing a more mature, really striking landscape tree, that's going to take more than 10 years. I would say 10 to 15 years is kind of the minimum there to have a pretty impressive tree. So it takes a lot of patience to grow them from seed, but it is definitely a lot of fun, and it's definitely worth it. Now, one of the reasons I like to grow from seed comes down to the variability. You really never know what you're going to get. So the main tree that I gather seeds from, I believe, is a bloodgood variety, and it produces a lot of beautiful red seedlings. However, there are mixes of different colors in there. For instance, here's a green leaf tree that came from kind of that mix of seeds there. You can see there are various leaf shapes even among the reds. So you can see that versus, say, more traditional leaf shape. So you can see there's not only a color difference, but a leaf shape difference. Here's another color difference. And you can see kind of the variability with red on the edges and green in the middle. And also, uniquely, these I estimate are the same age. And so you can see there's also a growth difference from tree to tree. So you can see that. Then you have ones like this where maybe the middle of the leaf will be green, with the red being edges and more contrasty there than some of the rest of them. And then once again here, you can see the green starting to come out, but it's a lighter green. So that's also a very, very good looking tree as well. But you can see that. And then obviously I talked about this one and the leaf variability there. So you have variability in growth, you have variability in leaf, and then you will get some very unique colors that I've shown you in the past. I have several that I hope to name in the future, but it's going to take a few years. I need to grow them out for a minimum 6-7 years and really watch them and then start propagating off of those, and maybe I'll have a few named varieties in the future from seed grown. Now, we'll talk now about potting these trees up in general care. So for the first year, traditionally I have been potting them up in little 3.5-inch square pots like this. And the problem I'm coming across right now is I actually got a nursery license now, and I have a very limited amount of space in which to grow these Japanese maples. Japanese maples need to be protected from the hot afternoon sun, or else the leaf will scorch a little bit. So I have a limited space to grow it that way. Because of that, space is really a premium. And when you have 3.5 square pots in a standard 10-20 tray, you can fit 18 of those. However, this year I'm experimenting with these smaller ones, which I believe are probably 2-inch pots, maybe like 2.25, but roughly 2-inch pots. They're the same height roughly, maybe slightly less than these, but they're almost the same height, but of course there's a lot less soil. You can actually fit 32 of these in one of these trays. So I think going forward, what I'm going to try to do is start off with pots like this. This will be my first year. I'll put them in this, let them fill that out, and then after a full years of growth, then I can put them in a pot like this, graduate them up to this, let them grow in that for a full year, and then from that I'm going to experiment with 2 different pot sizes. Let me grab 2 different pot sizes that I'm going to experiment with when it comes to sizing up from this. Normally I would have gone directly from this to a larger container, but I'll show you how I expect to graduate up this year. Okay, so following this pot size, I'm going to experiment with a 4-inch square. So it's roughly the same height as the 3.5 square, but it actually is wider there, so it will allow a little bit more root growth. Elsewise, I'm going to try some of these pots here that are, I believe, yeah, they're also roughly 4 inches on the top, but of course they're quite a bit deeper. And so I'm going to experiment going to something like this versus what I would have done in the past, which would then go directly to, for some of the taller ones, directly to a gallon container, or as I'll talk about for space efficiency, these square 1/2 gallon pots. So I'm going to try to be not quite so aggressive in potting them up because space is a constraint. Okay, so as I mentioned, when it comes to the 3.5 square pots in a standard 10-20 tray, I can fit 18 of these. If I were to instead use the rough equivalent when it comes to a round pot, which I did order in the past, but I decided not to use them very much, because what ended up happening is I could only put roughly 15 of those in a 10-20 tray. And you can see they don't actually set down pretty nicely. Some of them overlap. But there's a lot of empty space in between, whereas with the square, it makes use of every little bit of the tray. So it may not seem like much of a difference when you have 3 less per tray, but when you're trying to maximize your space, I think that's a big deal. Plus, these sit a lot nicer and look nicer on the tray. Now if we move to the traditional #1 container, and some of these vary, this is a little bit more squatty than a traditional one, but as you can see here, these squatty #1 containers roughly, you can fit 4 in a tray like this, and there's a lot of wasted space here. Also, when it comes to sticking these like in a row like this, on this table here, I could probably, I could probably squeeze 5 on like a table like this, but 4 would be more comfortable, something like that. So you can see the space efficiency there, and then there'd be lots of gaps. As you put pots next to it, you could kind of stagger it, but then you'd kind of have wasted space. And if you did it this way, you have a big empty space in the middle. So instead, what I'm moving to are these, I believe these are 1/2 gallon, and they're like 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches, roughly, somewhere around there. They might be 6 inches tall, but roughly that. And these allow me to put 8 in one of these trays. It sits in here very nicely. It's very uniform. It allows me to carry them easier, and it allows me to maximize space efficiency here. So once again, if space is a premium and you can find a good source of these, which there are quite a few good sources online, and I can link to a few in the video description, this is a good idea. When it comes to fertilizing Japanese maples, I'll just briefly talk about that. I have talked about this in a previous video. But you don't need to fertilize them until after the trees are at least 1 year old. So for this first year of growth, like these guys here, you don't need to fertilize these. Just put them in a good potting soil. I personally like to use G&B organics quite often. Once they get to this age, if you decide to pot these up into a slightly bigger container, that would be a good time to go ahead and put a little bit of fertilizer in that. And then I would recommend fertilizing your Japanese maples once a year. Sometime in my environment here, I do them in May. I like to do it right after that last frost equivalent. So when you're putting out your frost tender plants like your tomatoes and stuff like that in the garden, that's a good time to go ahead and fertilize your Japanese maple trees. And that's a good time because you want to encourage that summer and spring growth, but you don't want to encourage growth too late in the season. When it comes to the actual kind of fertilizer you can use specific fertilizer made for Japanese maples. People do sell that, but I personally use a G&B Organics product. Let me grab that and I'll show it to you. I currently use this G&B Organics Rhododendron, Azalea, and Camellia fertilizer, which has an NPK ratio of 4:5:2, and this works pretty well for me. I'm going to be experimenting this year with some other fertilizers to kind of see if something works even better than this, but this has been great, and it's done very well for me. You want to make sure that you don't put something that has a ton of nitrogen, and you don't want a fast release fertilizer. You want either a good organic option like this that's derived from natural ingredients, so it actually allows the nutrients to very slowly break down in the soil and go to the plant, so it takes a few months for those to break down, or you want to specifically use a very slow release fertilizer. Once again, not just a fast release liquid fertilizer or something like that. You might kill your tree doing that. Not the same fertilizer generally that you'd use on your veggies with very high NPK ratio, especially on that nitrogen side. You want to use something that's either organic with kind of a lower nitrogen and a slow release, something that's designed for that, and that'll be best for your Japanese maples. The last topic that I want to talk about on this video is how I tag my plants. So you can see here I have these great little labels affixed to these particular little pots here, and I have their Japanese maple, Acer palmatum, seed grown. And so those are very helpful when you're selling plants, to have a good, nice label telling you what the plant is. When it comes to bigger plants, when I pot them up in a bigger pot like this, what I do is I go ahead and put that same label, and I'll talk about what kind of label I use, but I put that same kind of label on one of these plant markers, the kind that have a big area here. And I'll link to where I get these on Amazon down below if you want to, and I'll also link to where I get the labels. But I actually use, to print these, with a laser printer, so this won't work with an inkjet printer, but I went online and found a company that sells these sheets of labels, and I believe these are 2-inch by 1-inch labels, and they fit very nicely with these plant markers. This is either made out of nylon or polyester or something like that, but it's a waterproof label, and if you use a laser printer, it goes on waterproof as well, and those appear to be lasting quite well. And so this is something that I'm going to be using going forward. I experimented with a thermal laser printer, just a little inexpensive one, not the commercial nursery ones that are really expensive. And that was good for a short period of time, but the sun caused those labels to turn really brown and kind of fade. So it didn't work for a long-term solution, but I believe this is a much better long-term solution. So I wanted to share that with you. It's a good, inexpensive way. All you have to invest in is some labels, which aren't that expensive. If you already have a laser printer, then you have that, or you can buy an inexpensive laser printer for not much more than $100 or so. And then you can get some of these little plant marker labels, which once again aren't that expensive, and they're available on Amazon, and I will link to that below. And the links that I put, some of those will be affiliate links, and if you purchase with those links, that will help support this channel, for full disclosure. But I just wanted to put that out there. Well, I hope this video was helpful to you. I hope it was helpful to you to see not only some variability and to see kind of the growth of these Japanese maples and how long it takes to get a more mature tree. If you're not already subscribed to this channel, if you subscribe and click the notification bell, YouTube will notify you when I put up new videos. And I do have quite a bit of content that I expect to put out this year. And a lot of it will revolve around propagating. As we move into the summer here, and especially as we move into June, I'm going to be doing quite a bit of propagating when it comes to grafting. I likely will do at least an air layer or two, growing from cuttings as well. And just if you want to follow along with that journey, then it's a good idea to subscribe. Well, thank you so much for watching. Until next time.